I gotta say, I love this trend of executives proving themselves wrong because it highlights just how stupid executives are and how undeserving they are of the paycheck that they get and the position that they hold, given the short-term thinking that leads to long-term ruin for beloved developers and studios and IPs and whatnot. Today I want to talk about EA and their insinuation that the reason Dragon Age the Veilguard failed was because it was a live service, and a recent EA published title that came out that completely blew that argument out of the water, that completely destroyed their own argument. So for those who don't know, Dragon Age the Veilguard, it engaged approximately 1.5 million players during the quarter, which is nearly 50% less than what EA was expecting, and they're wondering what the heck went wrong with this game. Well, the suggestion that they made, Andrew Wilson, this is what he said during a financial meeting, is that games need to directly connect to the evolving demand of players who increasingly seek shared world features and deeper engagement alongside high-quality narratives in this beloved category. Dragon Age had a high-quality launch and was well-received by critics and those who played. However, it did not resonate with a broad enough audience in this highly competitive market. This argument is so moronic not only because EA's own live service ventures have failed, like Anthem, which was BioWare's own live service that completely flopped, and so it goes to highlight whether a game is live service or not doesn't make a difference in terms of its success or failure. It's more about the quality of the game and the word of mouth that spreads surrounding it. There's also the fact that just live services have been dying left and right, from multiverses to X-Defiant. As far as Ubisoft is concerned, Skull and Bones isn't doing particularly well. You've got Sony canceling a bunch of live services, especially after the release of Concord, because they realized that live services are an expensive and risky venture where there's no guarantee of success. Beyond that, you've got developers who are pretty just pissed off and or scoffing at this notion that Dragon Age the Veilguard failed because it wasn't a live service. So former BioWare developers spoke out against EA's moronic statement. But also speaking out was EA Originals' Joseph Ferris. He runs a studio called Hazelight Studios, and many of Hazelight's recent games were published by EA, specifically under EA's EA Originals program. And he kind of spoke out, and I've talked about this before, where he said that he himself and Hazelight as a studio will never be a live service game studio, and live service will never be his choice, scoffing at the notion that the reason Dragon Age the Veilguard failed was because it wasn't a live service, stating that Hazelight is proof, living proof that when you trust in your vision and go with it, you can still reach a big audience. That's what I want people to focus on, which I think is very well put. I've always loved how outspoken Joseph Ferris is against EA's own dumb quotes and their dumb ideas and notions, despite him being published by EA. And the thing is, he knows that he's in this position where he puts to action what he says. He did so recently with the launch of Split Fiction, which was met with universal acclaim, sitting at 91% from 89 critic reviews. Many are calling it a strong Game of the Year contender. Some are saying it's one of their favorite games of all time. Me personally, I finished Split Fiction like 2 days ago, and it is one of the most imaginative games and one of the most just incredible co-op experiences I've ever had the pleasure of playing in my time playing video games. This is a game that continuously reimagines itself, and some of the mechanics that they implement, the variety of genres that they kind of feature across the board, and I mean, the final level in particular, and the utterly mind-bending stuff that they did with the visuals and the mechanics, and I don't want to spoil the final level, but it was just so mind-blowing what they did there that Split Fiction really pushes the boundaries of creativity in a way that I've rarely seen video games do. Split Fiction, in my opinion, is a masterpiece, and this is something that a lot of critics are recognizing. And then beyond that, if you go to Steam right now, the user score is sitting at an overwhelmingly positive score of 98% from over 11,000 user reviews. Now, the sheer number of user reviews on display here already highlights just how well this game is selling. And beyond that, if you look at Steam charts, you will find that Split Fiction is peaking consistently in the 200,000s. Let me actually refresh this to see how the game is doing today. There we go. So look at this. Look at it peaking at 197,000 starting out, and then it peaked to new heights at 254,000, and then to new heights at 259,000, and it's bringing back players fairly consistently. The last 24-hour peak here is 239,000. So what this suggests is that Split Fiction is a game that has already gone on to sell millions upon millions of copies, and the feedback on social media has been incredibly positive. Word of mouth is spreading. And what's important to highlight is that Split Fiction is not a live service game. And we compare its numbers to something like Dragon Age the Veilguard, you'll see that Split Fiction is blowing Dragon Age the Veilguard out of the water, bringing in roughly 3 times more players than Dragon Age the Veilguard did at its peak of 89,418 players, which is significant, but it did highlight that the game maybe didn't sell quite as well as it could have, and EA confirmed this when they said that only 1.5 million players engaged with the title. Engaged meaning that it's a combination of both people who purchased the game outright and people who tried out the free trial, and so the actual sales might be even worse than what EA is trying to suggest here by kind of sneakily saying 1.5 million players engaged to make the figures look a little better. And so this is right here, Exhibit A of just how wrong EA is. Split Fiction is not this share world experience. It is a multiplayer game in that it is cooperative and there are online features, but that is not what made this game the success that it is. It is the inventiveness. It is the way Joseph Fares, through his idealism, has managed to craft something that genuinely pushes the boundaries of co-op gameplay of this entire genre. And he already kind of set the groundwork for that with It Takes Two, which was also incredibly inventive and imaginative to the point that it actually won Game of the Year. And it managed to sell 23 million copies. Split Fiction is already doing better numbers when it comes to all-time peak concurrent players on Steam at launch than It Takes Two did. So over the long term, I would imagine that Split Fiction can reach similar numbers to It Takes Two, possibly surpass it, given the critical reception surrounding it. And it's worth noting that Split Fiction actually scored better than It Takes Two did on Metacritic. It Takes Two scored 88 from 50 critic reviews and won Game of the Year. So imagine Split Fiction with currently its score of 91% from 89 critic reviews, just how good of a chance it has to potentially win Game of the Year. But what I'm trying to highlight here is what happens when you let a development studio cook. Hazelight's success with It Takes Two and with Split Fiction, it didn't just come out of nowhere. They built up to that. They released quite a few games. You'll see that Joseph Fares first started by developing Brothers: A Tale of Two Sons via a studio called Starbreeze Studios. He then moved on to found his own studio, Hazelight Studios, through which he made A Way Out. And then came It Takes Two and Split Fiction. So with Joseph Fares, it took multiple iterations and a very creative mind and a very daring and ambitious mind, one that wasn't hampered by corporate mandates to get to where he is right now. And now we're seeing Joseph Fares bring critical acclaim and incredible sales for EA. And little doubt that It Takes Two is a very profitable venture, given that it's a roughly dozen hours long experience, so its budget isn't overblown. It was developed within a reasonable amount of time, and given the millions of copies it's likely to sell, I imagine that in terms of the profit margins, Hazelight and the release of Split Fiction will do very well for EA when it comes to their financial outlook and trying to make their numbers look good for investors. And that's what happens when you just leave developers to kind of make what they're best at and leave them to do so without trying to kind of infuse this notion that if something isn't a live service, then it's bound for failure, when the common trend actually tends to be the other way around. Live services, more often than not, tend to fail epically, especially because of how competitive the live service market is, and given the fact that these are meant to be long-term games that you are supposed to kind of come back almost like a part-time to full-time job and spend money on it recurrently to ensure that you're able to keep up with the rest of the pack. Whereas something like Split Fiction is, again, a dozen hours long experience, has a beginning, middle, and end. It's not a live service. So by all metrics, according to EA, this game should have been an epic failure because people are not interested in games and experiences like this anymore. People have moved on, and all they want is share world experiences, right? And yet right here, right in front of EA's eyes, we have proof, definitive proof that what the executives are saying about Dragon Age the Veilguard's failure and the reason behind it, and it not being a live service, how utterly erroneous and false and stupid that reasoning and notion is. EA itself proved EA wrong through the launch of Split Fiction. And so what the hell are you talking about, EA? You can see that if you make something that raises the bar in a way that gets people talking, you will get success, no matter what the genre, whether it's live service or not. Live services can succeed if it does something new, if it takes something that exists and just does it that much better. Or if you're a game like Split Fiction that does stuff that like few other games or no other game has really done to this level in terms of the imaginative creativity of the co-op gameplay. And Joseph Fares said previously that at the end of the day, we see clearly, and Hazelight is living proof that when you trust in your vision and go with it, you can still reach a big audience. And he wasn't just saying that to, appease the audience that might potentially be listening to him. He said this because he knows this, because he's seen it, because he himself has been able to execute on these words. And not only did he do that with It Takes Two, he's now doing it again with Split Fiction. So I guess what I'm trying to say here is, hey, EA executives, wake the fuck up and stop trying to put out false notions and stop trying to scapegoat your own failures and the failures of games like Dragon Age the Veilguard and try to say that it's about it not being a live service. Actually look at what the problem was. Dragon Age the Veilguard failed because when it comes to the direction that game went in, it just, for a lot of people, didn't quite feel like the Dragon Age of old, especially where Origins is concerned. It was a polished product that worked on release, and it's not like by any means the worst game ever or anything, but in terms of the appeal that it had for fans, it just wasn't there, and it didn't appeal to a broader audience either. So I want to congratulate Split Fiction, and I want to thank Split Fiction and Joseph Fares for kind of sticking to their ideals and proving that those kinds of ideals can lead to great success on top of critical acclaim that will have your game stand the test of time. But that's one man's take. Let me know in the comments below what your thoughts and opinions are on the success of Split Fiction and what you think about the game itself if you've played it. Share your experiences below, and to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.